Detective Grimshaw adjusted his worn leather coat as he stepped from the black sedan onto the gravel driveway of Thornfield Academy. The imposing Victorian structure loomed before him, its red brick facade darkened by decades of London's soot and rain. Gothic spires pierced the gray October sky, and ivy clung desperately to the weathered walls like gnarled fingers. The Academy's headmaster, Dr. Edmund Blackthorne, hurried down the stone steps to meet him. The man's face was pale, his silver hair disheveled as if he had been running anxious fingers through it repeatedly. "Detective Grimshaw, thank heavens you've come," Blackthorne said, extending a trembling hand. "This is absolutely dreadful. In my 30 years as headmaster, nothing like this has ever happened." Grimshaw shook the man's hand briefly, his steel-gray eyes already scanning the grounds. "Tell me exactly what occurred, Doctor." Blackthorne. "Leave out nothing, however insignificant it may seem." The headmaster wrung his hands. "Yesterday morning, our Year 9 students departed for their annual history expedition to Hadrian's Wall. The trip was meant to last 3 days. Everything was perfectly normal. 32 students, 4 teachers, and 2 parent volunteers. They traveled in our school coach, driven by Mr. Peterson, who has been with us for 15 years. And when did you first realize something was wrong? Last evening. They were supposed to call when they reached the youth hostel in Hexham. When no call came by 8 o'clock, I rang the hostel myself. They told me no group from Thornfield Academy had checked in. That's when I contacted the police." Detective Grimshaw pulled out his weathered notebook, its pages yellowed from countless investigations. "Who was the trip organizer?" "Mrs. Catherine Winters, our head of history. She's been planning this excursion for months. Very thorough woman. Very reliable. I'll need the complete passenger list and all documentation related to the trip. Also, has anyone attempted to contact the missing persons directly?" Dr. Blackthorne nodded vigorously. "We've tried calling all the mobile phones, students, teachers, everyone." Nothing. They all go straight to voicemail, as if the phones have been switched off or are in an area with no signal. "Most curious." Grimshaw closed his notebook. "Show me where they departed from." The headmaster led him around the main building to a large courtyard. Tire tracks were still visible on the wet tarmac, evidence of the coach's departure the previous morning. "The vehicle registration?" Grimshaw asked. "LX09THF, a 40-seat Mercedes coach. Quite new, well-maintained." Detective Grimshaw knelt beside the tire tracks, studying them intently. The deep impressions suggested a fully loaded vehicle. Rising, he noticed something glinting near the edge of the courtyard, a small piece of broken plastic, bright blue in color. "Dr. Blackthorne, does this look familiar?" He held up the fragment. The headmaster examined it closely. "It could be from one of the students' devices. Many of them have blue phone cases or gadgets. Interesting that it should break here, just before departure." Grimshaw pocketed the evidence. "I'll need to interview the teachers who remained behind, particularly anyone who spoke with Mrs. Winters before the trip." They returned to the headmaster's office, a cramped room filled with academic honors and dusty books. Dr. Blackthorne produced a manila folder thick with documents. "Here's everything: the trip itinerary, permission slips, emergency contact information, insurance papers. Mrs. Winters was exceptionally thorough." Grimshaw spread the papers across the desk, his trained eye scanning for anomalies. The itinerary was indeed detailed. Departure at 9 a.m., lunch stop in Scotch Corner, arrival at Hexham by 4 p.m., followed by an evening meal and early rest before beginning the historical tour. "This lunch stop," he said, pointing to the document. "Was it prearranged?" "Yes, Mrs. Winters always stops at the same service station, the Scotch Corner services. The students look forward to it." "And the route?" "The A1 motorway, direct and safe. Mrs. Winters has driven it dozens of times with school groups. Detective Grimshaw studied the passenger manifest. 32 names, ages 14 to 15, along with the 4 accompanying staff members. Something caught his attention. This student here, Marcus Pemberton. His emergency contact differs from his address. Dr. Blackthorne leaned over to look. Ah, yes, Marcus lives with his grandmother. His parents are overseas. Diplomatic service, I believe. Mrs. Pemberton is his guardian while he's in England. Has she been contacted? Of course. She's quite beside herself with worry. Grimshaw continued examining the documents when his phone buzzed. The caller ID showed Inspector Davies from the Yorkshire Constabulary. Grimshaw here. Detective, we found something. The coach has been located in a car park near Catterick, about 30 miles south of their intended destination. It's empty. Any signs of struggle? None obvious. The vehicle appears undamaged, but it's been abandoned. We're treating the area as a crime scene until you arrive. I'm on my way. Grimshaw ended the call and turned to the headmaster. Dr. Blackthorne, I need you to remain here and coordinate with the families. Tell them we're making progress, and if anyone contacts the school, anyone at all, you must notify me immediately. The drive to Catterick took 2 hours through winding Yorkshire roads. The landscape grew increasingly desolate, rolling hills giving way to sparse woodland and gray stone walls that had stood for centuries. Inspector Davies met him at the car park, a remote lay-by used primarily by hikers and tourists visiting the nearby medieval ruins. The Thornfield Academy coach sat isolated at the far end, looking oddly pristine against the wild moorland backdrop. Any witnesses? Grimshaw asked as they approached the vehicle. None we've found. This area sees little traffic, especially midweek. The nearest village is 3 miles away. Detective Grimshaw circled the coach slowly, noting every detail. The doors were locked, windows intact, no obvious damage. He produced a set of specialized tools from his coat and carefully opened the driver's door. The interior revealed more questions than answers. Personal belongings were scattered throughout. Backpacks, water bottles, smartphones left behind on seats. But everything appeared hastily abandoned rather than violently removed. Inspector, look at this. Grimshaw pointed to the driver's seat, where the keys remained in the ignition. Mr. Peterson would never leave his keys behind, especially not with 32 children in his care. Davies nodded grimly. There's something else. We found fresh tire tracks leading away from the car park. A large vehicle, possibly a lorry or second coach. They followed the tracks to where they joined a narrow country road before disappearing onto the tarmac. Grimshaw knelt at the junction, examining the ground carefully. The tracks are deep here, he observed. The vehicle was heavily loaded. And see these scuff marks? Someone was moved from one vehicle to another. You think they were transferred against their will? The evidence suggests coordination, planning. This wasn't a random incident. Grimshaw stood, brushing dirt from his knees. We need to trace every possible route from this location. Also, I want all CCTV footage from the A1 between Scotch Corner and here, time stamped around the time they should have passed. As they prepared to leave the scene, Grimshaw's attention was drawn to something wedged beneath a stone near the coach. A small piece of paper, barely visible and protected from the wind by its hiding place. He carefully extracted it. A corner torn from what appeared to be a larger sheet, with part of a handwritten message visible. Old Mill, 3 miles north. Inspector, we may have our first real lead. They spread an ordnance survey map across the bonnet of Davies' car. 3 miles north of their current position, the map showed the ruins of Blackwater Mill, an abandoned flour mill beside a long disused railway line. It's completely isolated, Davies observed. No road access, just hiking paths through the moor. Perfect for someone who doesn't want to be disturbed. Grimshaw folded the map. We'll need backup, but they must approach cautiously. If the children are being held there, we can't risk panicking the captors. The sun was setting as they coordinated with the local constabulary. Grimshaw insisted on a careful reconnaissance before any rescue attempt. Too many operations failed due to haste and assumptions. As darkness fell, he found himself hiking across rough moorland with Inspector Davies and 2 experienced constables. The mill lay in a hollow beside a sluggish stream, its stone walls partially collapsed but the main structure still standing. From a ridge overlooking the site, they could see lights flickering in the mill's upper windows, definitely signs of occupation. "There," whispered Davies, pointing toward the building's rear. A van, possibly 2 vehicles hidden behind the structure. Grimshaw studied the scene through binoculars. The mill appeared to have 3 floors, with the lights concentrated on the middle level. Smoke rose from a chimney, suggesting the occupants had made themselves comfortable for an extended stay. "We need to know how many we're dealing with and where exactly the hostages are being held," he murmured. "I'm going closer." "Detective, that's extremely dangerous." "Inspector, those children have been missing for over 24 hours. Every moment increases the risk to their safety." Moving silently through the bracken and heather, Grimshaw approached the mill from the downstream side, using the sound of flowing water to mask his footsteps. The building's lower level appeared to be flooded, explaining why the occupants had chosen the upper floors. Through a crack in the stone wall, he could see into what had once been the grinding room. 20 or more sleeping bags were arranged on makeshift wooden platforms above the water level. Several young figures were visible, though he couldn't determine if they were restrained. A voice echoed from above, adult, authoritative, speaking in clipped tones that suggested military or police background. "Coordinates confirmed. Collection is scheduled for 0300 hours. Ensure the packages remain secure until then." Grimshaw felt his blood run cold. The clinical terminology suggested these weren't ordinary kidnappers seeking ransom. This had the hallmarks of human trafficking, a crime that had been increasing across northern England. He needed to get closer to identify the number of captors and their weapons. The mill's stone construction provided excellent concealment, but the ancient mortar had crumbled in places, creating handholds for climbing. Scaling the exterior wall, he reached a narrow window that provided a view into the upper floor. 3 men were visible, 2 younger individuals who appeared to be following orders, and an older man with military bearing who was clearly in command. The leader was studying a map spread across a wooden table, while one of his subordinates monitored radio communications. Various pieces of equipment suggested this was a well-organized operation with significant resources. "Package inventory complete," reported one of the younger men. 32 items, all secure. Transport arrives in 6 hours. "And the handlers?" "Secured in the lower chamber." "They won't cause problems." Detective Grimshaw realized with growing alarm that they were planning to move the children again before dawn. Whatever their ultimate destination, once the captives left this location, finding them would become exponentially more difficult. He began his careful descent, planning to return to Inspector Davies with intelligence that would allow them to plan a rescue operation. But as he reached the mill's foundation level, his foot dislodged a loose stone that tumbled into the water with a splash that seemed thunderous in the quiet night. What was that? The voice from above carried clearly through the still air. Probably just wildlife. These old buildings attract all sorts of creatures. "Check it anyway. We can't afford any complications." Grimshaw pressed himself against the wall, hoping the shadows would provide sufficient concealment. Footsteps echoed on wooden stairs, then a powerful torch beam began sweeping the area around the mill's base. The light passed within inches of his position, and he held his breath until his lungs burned. Finally, the footsteps retreated, but he could hear increased radio chatter from above, suggesting heightened alertness. He needed to return to Davies immediately. Whatever rescue plan they developed would have to be implemented quickly before the captors moved their hostages again. The journey back across the moor seemed to take forever, every sound magnified in the darkness. When he finally rejoined the police team, Inspector Davies was coordinating with additional units that had arrived from York and Leeds. "Detective, what did you find?" 32 hostages confirmed, along with at least 4 adult captives who appear to be the teachers and driver. 3 captors visible, possibly more. They're planning to move everyone before dawn. We have perhaps 5 hours. "Armed response units are en route," Davies reported. "But in this terrain, a direct assault would be extremely dangerous." Grimshaw studied the tactical map the police had prepared. The mill's position in the hollow provided natural defensive advantages for the captors, while the rough moorland made approach difficult for rescue teams. "There's another way," he said finally. "The old railway line. According to the survey maps, it passes directly behind the mill. If we could approach along the cutting, we'd have cover until the final approach. That line's been abandoned for 60 years. The tracks have been lifted, and the cutting may be impassable. But it's our best option for getting close without being detected." As they debated tactics, Grimshaw received a call from Dr. Blackthorne at Thornfield Academy. "Detective, I've received a ransom demand. They want £2 million to be delivered to a location near Newcastle by tomorrow evening. Dr. Blackthorne, under no circumstances should you comply with that demand. We've located the hostages and are preparing a rescue operation." "Thank God. The families are desperate for news. Some of the parents are threatening to pay the ransom themselves. Tell them we'll have their children back safely within hours." The rescue operation began at midnight. Following the abandoned railway cutting, Grimshaw led a team of specialized officers through terrain that hadn't seen human activity for decades. The going was treacherous. Fallen trees, collapsed embankments, and pools of stagnant water created obstacles that had to be carefully negotiated in absolute silence. As they approached the mill's location, the railway cutting provided exactly the concealment Grimshaw had hoped for. They could observe the building from an elevated position without being detected. The tactical team had brought thermal imaging equipment that revealed the precise positions of all individuals within the structure. The hostages were confirmed on the middle level, while the captors appeared to be maintaining watch positions on the upper floor. "Remember," Grimshaw addressed the assault team, "our primary objective is the safe recovery of the hostages. These children have been through enough trauma already." At exactly 3 a.m., coordinated teams moved simultaneously against all possible exit points from the mill. The operation unfolded with clockwork precision. Flashbang grenades disabled the captors' night vision, while armed officers secured each level of the building in sequence. Detective Grimshaw was among the first to reach the hostages. 32 terrified teenagers huddled together on makeshift bedding, many crying with relief as police officers assured them they were safe. "It's all right," Grimshaw said gently to the nearest group of students. "You're going home." Mrs. Winters and the other teachers were found bound in a storage room on the ground floor, shaken but unharmed. Mr. Peterson, the coach driver, had been kept separate from the others, but was similarly unhurt. As the captives were led to safety and the criminals taken into custody, Detective Grimshaw pieced together the full scope of the operation. The 3 captors were part of an international trafficking network that had been targeting school groups across northern England for months. "How did they know about our trip?" Mrs. Winters asked as paramedics checked her for injuries. "We'll know more after we interrogate the suspects," Grimshaw replied. "But it appears they had detailed information about your itinerary, which suggests inside knowledge." The investigation's final chapter unfolded over the following days. The plastic fragment Grimshaw had found at Thornfield Academy proved to be from a GPS tracking device planted on the school coach to monitor its movements. Analysis of the captors' communications revealed they had been planning the kidnapping for weeks, using information obtained through surveillance of the school. Most disturbing was the discovery that the criminal network had intended to transport the children to continental Europe, where they would have disappeared into a trafficking system that extended across multiple countries. Dr. Blackthorne personally thanked Detective Grimshaw during a ceremony at Thornfield Academy, where the rescued students were reunited with their families. "Detective, how did you know to search for them at the mill?" asked Marcus Pemberton, the diplomatic family's son who had shown remarkable composure throughout the ordeal. "Sometimes the smallest clues point toward the truth," Grimshaw replied, showing him the torn paper fragment. "Someone among your group was thinking clearly enough to leave us a message, even under tremendous stress." Mrs. Winters raised her hand tentatively. "That was me, Detective. When they moved us from the coach to the van, I managed to tear a corner from my trip notes and drop it. I wasn't sure anyone would find it." "Your quick thinking saved lives, Mrs. Winters. In every shadow lies a secret, and in every secret lies the truth." As Detective Grimshaw departed Thornfield Academy for the final time, he reflected on the case that had tested every aspect of his investigative skills. The successful rescue had required not just deductive reasoning, but careful observation, tactical planning, and no small amount of courage. The children would carry the memory of their ordeal, but they would also carry the knowledge that in their darkest hour, people had worked tirelessly to bring them home safely. In the end, that was what mattered most, the triumph of dedication and skill over those who would prey upon the innocent. The case files of Detective Grimshaw would record this investigation as one of his most challenging, but also one of his most rewarding. For in the shadows of that abandoned mill, truth had indeed prevailed over deception, and justice had been served. Another case closed in Detective Grimshaw's files. The missing children have been safely returned to their families. If you enjoyed this mystery, like the video and subscribe for more cases. Share in the comments. Which clue would you have followed first? Until the next investigation.